Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma. I am flying solo this week. Mr. Brian E. Roach is on vacation. Zach Flash Saladonia chomping at the bit to come back. Especially should be here today because I'm going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. But before I could get into those details, of course, piggybacking off of last episode, myself and Brian talking about what this Pittsburgh Steelers team, particularly the defense, might look like without TJ Watt. And now we no longer have to worry about that due to a large 3-year extension that Watt signed, became official yesterday, worth $123 million, 108 of those smackaroos fully guaranteed at signing, including a $40 million signing bonus. That means a very fat wallet, of which his brother JJ Watt commented and said, this guy better not ask me to pay for dinner anymore, or something along those same lines. Put the bill over there on that side of the table, right? So, yeah, TJ Watt, he's Steeler for life pretty much. I know some folks, there's a lot of ups and downs and positives and negatives and looking at things. I always try and see the glass half empty, the glass half full with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but make no mistake about this. TJ Watt's a future Hall of Famer. He's an elite generational talent that doesn't come around every day, and he's not a guy that could be easily replaced by any of the other players that are on the roster, as we noted in the last episode previewing training camp. Can't really see my shirt. It's somewhere in here. I'm geeked up. I'm ready to go for Pittsburgh Steelers training camp. The players are as well, as they are reporting today, Wednesday. They're bringing in all the snacks, all the goodies, all the furniture. So it's time to cover the other half of the football. Well, I always like the 3 phases of football. You know, I love my specialists. I mean, I don't have much to say. Just hoping Cameron Johnston comes back. I think we talked about this at the very end of last show, but he comes back healthy. That guy looked impressive just in camp. Season cut short with only the 1 game played in week 1 against the Atlanta Falcons. And this is going to kind of dip over into the offensive side of the ball too, because I don't know who the returners are going to be for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a number of options there as we go through this depth chart, look at some of the various players, trying to keep my arms around this show today and not let it just be a runaway train, which can be real easy to do when I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers and the quarterbacks, which I've done an awful lot this year. So again, I know I'm telling everybody, go back a few episodes. A lot of the information we've gone over, this isn't like talking a game preview like a month ago when we get into the season. This stuff has not dated yet, so a lot of good information that's out there for those who enjoy the show. And for those of you who are enjoying the show, thank you for joining us today. Jump into Arthur Smith and his offense. Oh, I didn't mention Chris Boswell. Hold on one second. I am a little scatterbrained. Chris Boswell, he's on his way to being the GOAT. He's the most elite kicker in the NFL. And Justin Tucker, as we know, kind of flamed out in Baltimore. So there's no other competition right away up against the Wizard of Boz. Wizard of Boz is the Wizard of Boz, as Brian has said. So jumping into year 2 of Arthur Smith's offense, what can we expect from Arthur Smith? Do we see an uptick with the Pittsburgh Steelers based on some of the moves that they've made this year? Last season, the Steelers offense ranked 23rd in yards. They were 16th in points. They were 4th in rushing attempts, 11th in yards, only 19th in touchdowns, and 25th in yards per attempt. In the run game, there are some things that got to change here, because that's really not good enough, and it's some of the worst numbers that Arthur Smith has experienced. He had a little worse his first year in Atlanta. I don't think he had Bijan Robinson yet, or at least not for a full season, and they immediately jumped to 3rd in yards, 4th in attempts. They were like 10th in scoring. That was all his the final season that he was there, but they were also the 1st in attempts. Some of that had to do with quarterbacking too, when you have like a Desmond Ridder and a Marcus Mariota, and those are the guys that you're saddled with and they take off and run. It's kind of like Justin Fields, and I think that's what everybody thought Arthur Smith was going to do coming into Pittsburgh last year with Justin Fields. Maybe not as much of a mobile Russell Wilson, but looking back at that offense, I don't know what you see a lot differently this season with Mr. Aaron Rodgers, former Super Bowl MVP, 4-time league MVP. What's he still got in the tank at 41 years of age? Doesn't turn over the ball a whole lot. That was happening with Russ a little bit. I think Russ was changing some plays. I think Russ was getting maybe a little aggressive or greedy. It's hard to fault a player that just has his heart in the right spot, like in Baltimore, where he ran with the ball and he ends up fumbling, didn't slide early enough, gets just tattooed. One of the safeties got him. I think it was Washington of the Ravens. But I digress. He's gone. Some of the miscues he had with George Pickens, also the reason why George Pickens is gone. This is a completely different look for Arthur Smith. And to some degree, we kind of know what Arthur Smith is. We kind of know what his philosophy is. And I think it's going to be running the football. And it's going to be interesting to see what that effect has on Mr. Aaron Rodgers in the way he plays his game. Because, Aaron Rodgers, he's not adverse to throwing the ball around the field, slinging it around everywhere. Whereas, I don't know if Arthur Smith's got the same concept. The Steelers last season, they didn't have the most passing attempts. In fact, they were 29th in the league, 27th in passing yards, and 20th out of the 32 teams with in touchdowns. They didn't turn it over a whole lot, though. They were third in the league as far as passing interceptions. So when I say carryover, you may not see as many attempts from a 41-year-old quarterback. Maybe not, early in the season. Maybe if you get behind, right? A little bit of a shootout, something like that. Put Rodgers out there. He's going to read defense. He's going to make maybe some adjustments. He's certainly got some of the players and tools on this offense to be able to make some plays. But I think they're really going to adjust and aid him by running the football, or at least that would be the thought, because that's what Arthur Smith is known to do. And I know you've got all the excitement that's surrounding a guy like D.K. Metcalf, little poster child for the podcast here today. Landed a new contract himself. Big, physical, wide receiver one, genetic freak, maybe another kind of generational athlete, even though his stats may have not always been up to that. Some of that's the quarterbacking in Seattle. Some of that's just having other great wide receivers in Seattle, like Tyler Lockett over the years. I'm trying to think if Doug Baldwin was still there when D.K. started, maybe like his rookie year or so. And of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba, which kind of made Metcalf, I'd say, obsolete over there. Seattle they did a lot of changes this year. And I know it's not a podcast about the Seahawks, but a lot of wholesale changes after being a team that they make the playoffs or they were just out. They won enough games, and the Steelers are they're a very great comparison here, because even though it's been in drips and drabs, but the Steelers team doesn't look the same as it did last season. So Arthur Smith has some different personnel, some different players to work with. The running back room looks a lot different. The quarterback room, almost different. Mason Rudolph is back, porn stash and all. I don't know what's up with that, my dude. Will Howard, the 6th round rookie pick out of Ohio State, a big physical specimen himself that a lot of people say, look at all the receivers that he had at Ohio State. Look at the offense, offensive coordinator Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, offensive-minded head coach at the collegiate level. He was playing in a pro system. He was playing against a lot of pro-ready players, a lot of guys he's going to be seeing on Sundays, particularly in the college football playoff. So I don't think I'm going to see Howard this year, but let's see how he develops. I don't want to spend or dwell too much on the quarterbacking side of things. I really just don't know how this is going to factor in with Aaron Rodgers. If he's a team player and there isn't all of the diva stuff and he's really sincere about wanting to compete and all of these maybe mentors some of these guys, I think it's going to be a very good experience for a Mason Rudolph and a Will Howard. Again, I'm saying this over and over, but Mason Rudolph could be one of these guys. He plays his cards right. Who knows where else he ends up playing quarterback at. Maybe he gets one more shot at being a starter in the pros. Maybe that shot is next year with the Steelers, or maybe Knock on wood, there's no serious injuries, but if Rodgers doesn't play, that's going to be your next guy up, Mason Rudolph. And I think, after all of this experience, when he's said and done in being a player in the NFL, I think he's going to make a fine coach somewhere. I just see it, just all of the different knowledge he's been able to absorb. Although some of it not as good when you're talking about a Matt Canada and Randy Fichtner, but you also learn what not to do, right? And that's part of his growing experience. But just kind of the guys that they're going to be throwing to, okay? I know there's been some emphasis that's been placed on various players. DK Metcalf, stud wide receiver 1. I'm very excited about DK. He's still in his prime. He's 28 years of age. Who's the wide receiver 2? Well, one of those guys that's out there, name gets thrown around a lot, Robert Woods. And Robert Woods hasn't done a lot over the last few seasons in the National Football League. He's bounced around between different teams. You may remember that he had, his stints with the Buffalo Bills, with the LA Rams, of which he had, his most success, 2 seasons with more than 1,000 yards, and then a third one nearly over 1,000, where he had 936 back when he was in LA. And then, some injuries start to creep up. He's 29, 30 years old, only played 9 games, goes off to Tennessee. This is the post Arthur Smith Tennessee Titans that didn't do as well. And of course, in 2022, Vrabel actually lasted 1 extra season, but Ryan Tannehill did not. It was not the same kind of team there in Tennessee, of which we're drawing some of the experience for Arthur Smith, right? So Woods with the Houston Texans the last 2 years, we know all of the different receivers that have been in Houston. You had Stephon Diggs, you had Tank Dell. I'm missing like 1 or 2 guys because there's been guys that have been hurt, but it's been a logjam. I actually thought that Woods would have been a trade candidate last season. And forgive me, man, my memory sometimes is like a goldfish. I'm trying to remember 5 dudes that played on the Houston Texans last year, none of which were on my fantasy teams, by the way. But you know what? Just for, giggles here, let's see. Nico Collins, another guy that was on there. Christian Kirk comes over. Some of that's this year's roster versus last year's, but you could get the point that Robert Woods at 33 years of age was expendable. But he has return experience. He has experience as a kick returner and a punt returner and a special teams player, of which he's done quite a bit of over the last few seasons, particularly the last 3 seasons. When he was in LA, didn't do as much. He did do more special teams, trying to earn his chops in Buffalo when he first entered the league. I think he's going to compete there. And I know Cordero Patterson is still on the roster too. I kind of like the idea of pairing. You have another running back. Now, Patterson's listed as running back / kick returner. You have another running back that's been added, Kenneth Gainwell. Gainwell, third down back, somebody that's a little shifty. He could run, he could catch, he could kind of do a lot of things. He doesn't do them exceptionally bad. He doesn't do them exceptionally great. He's kind of just a jack of all trades, master of none. Also a guy that was returning kicks, I believe punts as well, for the Philadelphia Eagles last season. It's going to be important as I bounce back to the wide receivers here, because I think this is how Robert Woods, despite his experience and his tenure in the league, he might get some early reps just based on that, because I don't know what you do with Calvin Austin. I don't know what you do with some of the other receivers on the roster, such as Roman Wilson, who did not see any playing time last year. Now, I've mentioned they are smaller wide receivers, looking up their actual size as listed by the Steelers, probably with lifts in their cleats as well. Let's see. We've got Calvin Austin listed at 5'9", 162. Roman Wilson listed at 5'10", 186. So they're in roughly the same category here, and they're going to be competing for reps probably as the wide receiver too. Somebody's going to have to ascend, and I got some other ideas about Arthur Smith, the way he plays in formations, but Mike Tomlin doesn't generally like to have somebody who gets a lot of offensive snaps also return punts. He tried to take those roles away from Antonio Brown many years ago, and to much of his chagrin, Antonio Brown still wanted to, knock over Spencer the punter from the Cleveland Browns, kick him right in the face, and return kicks, do return punts, do flips in the end zone, stick to the goalpost, and all the other crazy shit that Antonio Brown did before he started doing even crazier shit off the field outside of Pittsburgh, right? Excuse me while I get a swig of that nice coffee. Got the caffeine and the juice is going, right? So the wide receivers, the room, I'm going to go through a few other guys, but when you're looking at purely like a wide receiver 2 makeup or composition, I believe it's going to be Woods can be one of those guys that comes out there, but I think he comes out when it's a multiple receiver set. I don't think we see a lot of snaps necessarily with Woods in the game. Roman Wilson comes from, the University of Michigan, the Wolverines national championship team from the previous year under Jim Harbaugh, a very run-centric football team, a very physical wide receiver even for his size. He did not, he was injured, didn't play in the preseason last year. He came back, then he was hurt again, never really got on the field. So Roman Wilson's kind of a wild card as a third-round pick from last year. It's like having a new player yet again. And Mike Tomlin, especially with wide receivers, has been reluctant in previous years to throw the rookies out there right away. He did it with Pickens, but Pickens still sometimes was limited. So you might have some of those considerations as you're starting out this year with Arthur Smith's offense, especially in September. Robert Woods might be the safe guy to have. It's going to be nicer weather earlier in the year where Aaron Rodgers may throw the ball more versus when they could really lean into the run game later in the cold weather in Pittsburgh. Now, Rodgers is accustomed to cold weather. Played in New York for 2 years and then played in Green Bay, even colder weather for the rest of his career. Guy's been around for a minute, so we're going to see. But can he make stars out of a Calvin Austin with like a 4.2 40 and a Roman Wilson with a 4.3 40? I think you put those guys on the field at the same time with like a D.K. Metcalf. We start talking about some of the tight ends here in a moment. Mix for some real crazy matchup problems. And Woods, if he loses a step, who cares? If he's shifty enough and he can still run routes, those are the type of veteran players that know how to get defensive backs off their step, off their game, get open and move the chains. And as long as he has that trust with Aaron Rodgers, we'll see. Now, I know some people will say, well, you're crazy, Joe. Robert Woods might be a cut candidate. Also a possibility, but he's here. He's signed as a veteran to, aid this room where you otherwise don't have an incredible amount of experience. I mean, you got Calvin Austin. I still joke with my cousin from last year. What game was that where Calvin Austin, I was like, anytime touchdown. Might have been against the Chargers. Might have been the opener, the week 3 game. Let me see. Where's your game logs at, Mr. Calvin Austin? Last season, 548 yards. I'd say it's a little bit of a breakout. 4 touchdowns. He became kind of a target for Russell Wilson more frequently. Yeah, anytime touchdown. 4 catches, 95 yards. We're going to see Justin Fields this time against the Chargers in week 3. So sometimes not so bad of the memory, not so much of the goldfish versus the steel trap. I still remember that. It was just funny because I think the bet was something like plus 36 or 3,800 like for the prop bet. I'm not much of a betting guy. I talk about the odds a lot of times. I know enough to be dangerous. I don't usually put my money at risk, though. That's one of those ones where I wish I would have thrown $20 down. It would have been a nice little chunk of change to have at the end of the day. Little extra beer money, so to speak. So Calvin Austin, I believe third on the season, third in receiving yards for the season with the Steelers last year. We start to get into, obviously, George Pickens didn't put up the big wide receiver 1 numbers that everyone was hoping for. Only 900 yards, 59 receptions, 3 touchdowns. I believe all of that can be matched or exceeded by D.K. Metcalf. So Austin was third on the team with 548 yards, and he had 1 more touchdown than George Pickens. That's really a feather in his cap. The rest of the room, Ben Skoranek, real scrappy guy that... he's special teams demon. You got to have guys there too. He's also been somebody that you could run, an underneath route, move the chains, pretty steady hands. Also a physical guy that could be out there as a wide receiver too. If you see him in Metcalf, I'm thinking run. And excuse me, that goes back to Arthur Smith's philosophy. It goes to the running backs. You got Jaylen Warren, great pass pro, just sometimes concerns with protecting the football. Hasn't been as durable as a Najee Harris, who of course our prayers go out to too for the incident he was involved in around the 4th of July. Now he's on the non-football injury list, or the PUP. You placed him on one of them out there with LA, and he's already got to compete with Amari and Hampton. So it's like, how the mighty fall. And he was definitely looking for that big payday, and now his career is in potential jeopardy. So we'll see. But that's because Jaylen Warren does such a fantastic job when he's on the field. Got more of a share of the snaps last year. Also not only probably a better pass blocker, but also a bigger contributor in the passing game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He actually had 38 catches for 310 yards. Those rank 2 more catches than Austin, and ranks behind him yards wise. He's not going to get as many yards per reception. He's not really lining up in the slot like a Le'Veon Bell, but guess who might? And I'm not going to say that Todd Haley is going to come back and miraculously make a running back into a wide receiver too. But in this category, Caleb Johnson. This guy is going to be a beast. He just has those same kind of traits of a Le'Veon Bell, 6'1", 224. I believe he could play every single down. Will he start right out the gate? Probably not. And as long as Warren's healthy, you can ease Johnson in there. But I think by the end of the year, we're going to be talking about Johnson an awful lot. If you're one of the fantasy football types, which I do risk my money on, it's the long-term bet versus the short-term gamble, right? I don't know. Caleb Johnson might be somebody I stash, particularly if I'm going to handcuff, that is, put him with Jaylen Warren. So in case if Warren gets hurt, you have the next man up that you can insert into your lineup. He's just chiseled. He's just built a different way. So I can see Johnson getting an awful lot of reps and getting them early. We get into the tight end room, and we start to talk about some of the other weapons that the Steelers have. Wide receiver 2 category, definitely Pat Freiermuth, who finished the year with 65 receptions for 653 yards and 7 touchdowns. Will those numbers be bigger this season? I don't know that they will. When you add a Pro Bowl player such as John Smith to the mix, I don't know who can be a potential wide receiver 2 on this roster. It could be Freiermuth, could be Smith. I know I was talking running backs. You might not have to worry about all these other wide receivers. They might be there to make a big play if Rodgers could deliver the ball downfield. Smith and Mike McDonald's offense down in Miami. Mike McDonald's the wrong guy. That's the Seattle Seahawks. Mike McDaniel of the Miami Dolphins, head coach, very offensive guru, right? Pro Bowl year. I know Pro Bowl is everybody yuck, whatever. But first of his career, not just a popularity contest. He's the only guy on the Dolphins who made this team. He was targeted 111 times. Becomes the only guy that makes the Pro Bowl on this roster because he caught 88 of those balls for 884 yards, 8 touchdowns. This will be his 3rd go-round with Arthur Smith. So Arthur Smith knows John L. Smith, and the other Smith knows the other Smith. The Smiths know the Smiths, and the Smiths know football. Arthur is going to know how to use Jonnu in this offense. And that might be a lot of big looks for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those big looks, they include big dudes such as Darnell Washington, who, you think he might be underutilized or whatever, but half of his receptions last year moved the chains. Pat Freiermuth, who was already discussed a little bit earlier, I think he just keeps breaking out, continuing to improve. I think if Ben Roethlisberger were still here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, we would be talking a lot more about Pat Freiermuth and all of the big things that he's doing. So when you get him more involved, you get John L. Smith involved, you get Mount Washington involved. I think they're going to pound the rock, and just a lot, just based on the 2 backs that they got. A lot of that is obviously going to depend on the offensive line, but we take a look one more time at Arthur Smith and his history as an offensive coordinator and head coach. So we've got 6 years here between, you've got 2 with the Titans, 3 with the Falcons, and last year with the Steelers. His passing offenses, first 2 years in Tennessee, of which landed him a head coaching job. He made Tannehill into a household name, but they were only 31st and 30th excuse me, in pass attempts, 21st and 23rd in yards, but 8th overall in touchdowns, 5-2 ranks for interceptions turning the ball over. That's what really bit him when he came to Atlanta. They were still they were 19th in attempts. They ran the ball, or they threw the ball a little bit more, I should say, but they also turned it over a lot, and not for much of a payday here. 25th in touchdowns, 21st in interceptions. They just weren't getting it done offensively at all. They were ranked 29th overall, 26th in points, and offensively, they were 29th in rushing attempts, 31 in yards. It wasn't working out in Atlanta. So Arthur Smith goes to make some adjustments, and for better and worse, again, that was Matt Ryan's final year, and Matt Ryan didn't even throw for really 4,000 yards. His yards per attempt were a little bit down to 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. They flipped the script just a little bit. The offense gets a little bit better, but they were number 1 in rushing offense in 2022, the Atlanta Falcons were. And mind you, he's got his offensive coordinators and stuff too, but Smith was still holding the play sheets down in Atlanta. And the double duty sometimes, it just doesn't fit some of these guys. So it might have been better to just come back and operate in the booth, on the sidelines, wherever you find Arthur Smith, and just be an offensive coordinator versus the head coaching duties also thrown in as well. So where did this land Arthur Smith? Well, they were 3rd in yards. They were 10th in touchdowns. They were 4th in yards per attempt. The passing offense right back down, 31st. There was only one team that actually attempted fewer passes in 2022 than the Falcons, or gained fewer yards in the air. That's kind of hard to imagine if you have an Aaron Rodgers. But it's not so hard to imagine when you picture what the Steelers' offense looked like last season. Now, Atlanta they would also kind of have a little bit more of a rebound in 2023, despite the up and down quarterbacking Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix. The passing offense, still, he didn't lean on him too much, but 25th in attempts, 22 in yards. They didn't score a whole lot. There were a ton of turnovers. The Falcons' offensive line should have been a lot better than what they were. A lot of people got fired, or they moved on from. And I apologize too. That wasn't Kirk Cousins in 2023. Kirk Cousins was last year with Michael Penix. Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, Logan Woodside, even had John L. Smith throw a pass. I don't think we're going to see that again. Maybe we will. Maybe it was in some of that. I'm sorry. I was thinking about last season too, because Kirk Cousins got sacked an awful lot, as we know, was turning the ball over, lost his job to Michael Penix. But the Steelers instead last year, about in the same category as what the bad quarterbacking in Atlanta was too. They didn't lean on throwing the ball as much either. 29th in attempts, 27 in yards. Not hard to imagine that, especially with 6 games to start the season with Justin Fields. Now, running the football, the Steelers were 4th in attempts, 11th in yards. They didn't score enough. Mentioned this before, 19th in scoring, 25th in yards per attempt. That's got to get better. And how will it get better? Developing the offensive line, I believe, is key to this. I believe Freiermuth, Smith, Washington, maybe even Connor Hayward gets involved in this. Do you hand the ball to Cordero Patterson much anymore? Maybe a gimmick play here or there. But it's going to be all of the big boys up front. You've got Zach Frazier, who I think is developing into a premier player. Maybe not elite yet. Hard to say in year 2 when you've only got his rookie year to go by. But man, it was a good rookie year, and the Steelers know how to find centers at the pro level. Isaac Seumalo, Pro Bowl level year as well. We all thought he was a very good addition years ago as a free agent to the Steelers. He's playing left guard. Mason McCormick fills in now for James Daniels, who was hurt last year. McCormick ended up coming in for originally Spencer Anderson was in that mix too, and I think he's going to play everywhere on the line this year. Maybe as that extra lineman. So McCormick, he's just going to have to be better run blocking. I think the pass blocking grade was a little bit higher for him, but all around, you're talking about a 4th round pick out of South Dakota State coming and stepping into the pros in like week 4. That was still September or early October, and he's got to play the full year. Impressive enough. I don't think he was as big a liability as you would think. Troy Fautanu, yet another bonus player this year. Gets to play a little bit in Denver, and that was it. He was hurt for much of the preseason. very much looking forward to seeing what he's capable of doing at right tackle, because Broderick Jones moving over to the left. Broderick's, he's on a hot seat. We're going to have to talk about some of this too with some of the offensive linemen. Who's on the hot seat, who's not. So when you put all these pieces together, hopefully Broderick can play a little bit better on the left side. We have high hopes for Flatanu and McCormick, of course. Just got to be steady on the interior there. I think if the interior guys are good enough, I think that the various tight ends that the Pittsburgh Steelers have can help hold down the fort for, some run heavy personnel, some 12 personnel, some jumbo sets maybe along the goal line. And maybe this translates into more points, but it also translates into game planning and controlling the football in the time of possession for the Pittsburgh Steelers, something that they struggled mightily to do. Got to be complimentary with their defense. I think their defense got gassed against world-class offenses toward the end of the season. You can't say that the Ravens aren't a world-class offense and you play them twice in the same division. You play them twice near that later span, especially when you had to go on the road and face them. You had the Chiefs, you had the Eagles, you had the Cincinnati Bengals, and then you had the Ravens yet again in the playoffs for a third time. Those are some tough games. And the shootout too with the Bengals, even though that was a victory in Cincinnati, that kind of preceded where the dominoes started to fall. So if the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers has got to be there to make sure this team isn't a 3-and-out team, that they're not like 2 minutes with a commercial break and the defense is back on the field. Do I have higher expectations for this? Yes, I do. Because I think Aaron Rodgers, despite everything that I've said about him, his age and, some of the regression and stuff, he still, I think, achieved a pinnacle in the National Football League higher than what Russell Wilson did. And I love Russell Wilson, but a lot of Russell Wilson's game had been backyard football, drawing things up in the dirt, extending plays. I don't know that you necessarily get that with Rodgers, but you're going to get faster decision making with Aaron Rodgers. Age is just a number when it comes to decision making. Memory like a goldfish or not, like I was saying about myself, he's going to recognize things and he's going to react and quickly. If the physical traits are still enough for Aaron Rodgers, I think that translates to far better than what the Steelers, just look around, stand around like a statue with the Mitchell Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, at times even Mason Rudolph. I think Mason Rudolph reacted a little better, but you don't have as large of a picture, I think, a body of work to draw upon to make that conclusion. But very clearly we did with Fields and Wilson. They hold on to the ball way too long. Trubisky did 2 years ago. We knew that before he even came into Pittsburgh, as we did with Fields and Wilson. So Aaron Rodgers, he got sacked some. I think, I tried to say that the Jets had a better offensive line. I think that this offense, it's not going to be the cluster fuss that we saw in New York with Robert Saleh getting let go. And, you still had Nathaniel Hackett, who we found out really wasn't an architect of much in Green Bay. It was Matt LaFleur and a lot of his influence along with Aaron Rodgers. So when you take that all out of the equation, I think Rodgers comes in. I think everything kind of fits together and you've got an upgrade there. I think the offensive line should be better than it was last season as well. Dan Moore, he was always healthy and always available, but Roger Jones, he's got to play to the level of at least a Dan Moore. And I think Fatanu plays better than Dan Moore did on the right side. So I say that's an upgrade as well. You don't lose anything with the 3 interior guys. They were already here. Caleb Johnson, faster to hit the hole than Najee Harris. D.K. Metcalf, I don't think he's going to be on the wrong page with an Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's going to run the wrong route, cause turnovers. He's a big physical dude. The tight end group, John L. Smith, he's an addition. I just think all the way around, excuse me, this is a far better group than the Pittsburgh Steelers fielded last season. And to answer the title question, will Arthur Smith's Steelers offense excel in year 2? Even if they get to the middle of the pack in some of the offensive statistics, I think we're going to see a far better range of success. And that's going to be complementary to the changes that we talked about in the last episode that the Steelers made on defense. So I think they rank higher. I think they rank better. I think they're going to rank better in scoring, obviously. I think the attempts, you're still going to see a lot more running. You're going to see limited passing, but I think you see better scoring on both sides. And I think you see more yards per play on both the run game and the pass game in year 2 of Arthur Smith's offense. Folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any comments, any thoughts, please leave them here in the comments. The best place is YouTube. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, thank you. I know some of you are out there watching on Spotify. We have 2 different feeds. Once again, an audio and video feed. So video next day on Spotify on that feed. So thanks for supporting the platform here. My name is Joe. I'm excited. Training camp's getting underway. Check out social media as we continue to repost a lot of stuff over on X, formerly Twitter. We'll post some stuff also on Facebook, and I will be out there in person for some eyewitness accounts as well as the time permits. So until next time, as we always kind of put a bow on this show, we encourage all of you out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.